Openness and transparency isn't just about trust, though. It's also very much about better policy making, better decisions. When media can do their jobs of holding us to account and asking tough questions, when disclosure and access to information is just the way Parliament behaves.
Remember that? That was the Prime Minister's pledge back in 2015, but since then, things haven't quite panned out that way. Just last week, Information Commissioner Suzanne Legault said the government was failing to deliver on the promise of transparency. For example, red alert notices were given to two big institutions in this country, National Defence and Health Canada. The RCMP, Global Affairs, received an F. And then this week, one of the Prime Minister's own MPs pleaded with the Prime Minister to release his ministers and question period answerers from formulaic talking points, read from a note in the House of Commons. Let's bring back the Sunday Scrum. Susan Riley, John Ibbitson, and Katie O'Malley joining me in Ottawa. All right, John, I'm going to start with you at this time because you wrote the book on Stephen Harper. Let me ask you, how would you compare the level of transparency between these two men?
Almost identical. And I declare some measure of vindication in this because I had written in the biography of Stephen Harper that, yes, part of it was the man's all-controlling nature, his suspicious and secretive approach to the world, but it was also just the nature of modern government, that there are so many different forms of social media now. The damage from bad news accelerates so quickly and can get out of hand so dangerously that governments everywhere, including this government, feel the only solution is to tighten control over the delivery of the message. And you see that in the House of Commons. You see that in the inability to get real information out of freedom of information requests. Tristan Hopper at the National Post shared on Twitter an email from a bureaucrat who'd said, "I'd like to talk to you, but there's not much chance of it. These guys are even more controlling of the message than the Harper government was." So it's just the way government is this day. I don't like it. As a member of the media, I wish they could be more open and transparent. I wish cabinet could be more collegial and independent-minded. But it's the nature of the beast, I'm afraid, at this part. It's a 19th century way of governing, trying to operate inside the 21st century, and it doesn't fit well.
Susan?
It also takes two to tangle. I mean, I totally agree with John that that Trudeau certainly hasn't fulfilled his promise, but he's got an exceptionally truculent and belligerent opposition for early days. They haven't read the email either. They're not ready to give. They're not ready to act collaboratively or to share information. So we're stuck in this kind of system, which ultimately backfires. By the way, it doesn't work. Holding tight to information does not work. It simply feeds suspicion. And I wonder if I could give an example. We talked about it last week, this attempted purchase of Norsat, the Vancouver telecommunications company, by the Chinese. The government, for some reason, kind of was very evasive about the level of security clearance that this deal got. Now it turns out there's an American company making an identical offer, and yet the company in Vancouver is still going with the Chinese. Why is this happening? Even though security concerns have been raised about this transaction on the American side of the border by Canadian security experts, we don't get any explanation for the government. Perhaps there's a perfectly innocent explanation for this deal, but it looks bad, not just on the companies, but on the government.
Katie, what would have caused the government to cocoon?
Well, I suspect that you might recall there was this, I believe it would have been the 1st September they came back. So last September, after their first sort of summer holiday, they came back and there were a whole bunch of order paper answers to written questions tabled. And they were incredibly detailed, far more information than we used to get out of, previous governments. And it resulted in approximately 5 months of wall-to-wall coverage of relocation expenses and salaries and any number of pieces of data that the opposition and the media just gleefully seized upon to make life difficult for the Liberals for the foreseeable future. And that was something that they honestly didn't see coming. I think that for whatever reason, they didn't realize quite that much information was going to be going out and sort of dropped on an unsuspecting House of Commons. I think that that particular experience was a bit of a sort of a jolt. And they really realized that if you don't control or at least be aware of what information is going out, my gosh, it can basically, put your agenda off road for, you know, days, weeks, even months. And I think that that's perhaps part of the reluctance that we're seeing. That's not an excuse, by the way. That's just kind of an explanation. I will say this. We're expecting to hear from the Treasury Board President Scott Bryson and the Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould on Monday, at which point they are ostensibly going to unveil the government's plan to reform the access to information and sort of transparency system. I guess there's a technical briefing. There's a bill on the order paper, so this is a real thing in the sense that it's not just an announcement of like 5 bullet points in an action plan. But I think we'll get a sense then as to whether or not they're really serious about this and how far they're willing to go.
Yeah, there are a number of threads that lead to the conclusion that this government, as you say, John, as lacking in transparency as the former government was. And another thread is that almost halfway through the mandate, the government is yet to fill a single parliamentary watchdog vacancy.
Again, if this were Stephen Harper, we would be saying this man is destroying Canadian democracy. He's not appointing judges. He's not appointing parliamentary officers. He's trying to bring down the Crown corporations by refusing to appoint people to the boards of directors. Instead, we have all of these things happening under Justin Trudeau, and we're just shrugging our shoulders. I don't want to speculate on the motives why people were so much more hostile to Harper than they are to Trudeau, but the fact remains that for one reason or another, and some of them are good reasons, this government is taking an enormous amount of time to fill major appointments to agencies, boards, commissions, judgeships, you name it. And it's resulting in a serious inability for these institutions to do their jobs. Is it because Justin Trudeau was trying to bring down Canadian democracy? No, it's just the nature of the beast.
And go ahead, speculate, John. Speculate on why you think. I heard you snicker, Susan. Speculate on why you think it is. Do you think it's the media that's giving Justin Trudeau an easier ride on this? Except for the Sunday Scrum, of course.
Yeah, I think that the Parliamentary Press Gallery and a lot of other people in university campuses and other places around the country just don't like conservatives. And so if conservatives are doing bad things, then they're not just bad things, they're evil things because conservatives are evil. Whereas when liberals do bad things, well, that's just, as I say, it's the nature of the beast. I've always maintained that there is a certain animus by what I call the Laurentian elite toward conservative governments in general and toward Stephen Harper in particular. And the semi-free ride that Justin Trudeau is getting on this, I think, is just a reflection of that.
There it is, the catalyst for the famous eye roll from Susan.
Yeah, I totally disagree with that. The reason people didn't like Stephen Harper is because Stephen Harper was not a likable person. I mean, Justin Trudeau has got his annoying habits, I'll grant you that, but he's not as hateful. And so you tend to give people like that a bit of a break. That being said, I think there's a cascade of disappointments coming and present for this government that is really putting them in some peril. If the NDP could ever get their act together, I think they would win back a lot of the people who voted last time for Trudeau. I'm thinking of the transparency issue. Electoral reform, of course, was the first one. And now, apparently the military is considering the F-35s as one of the new fighter jet possibilities. And that was a very popular, Trudeau's opposition to that purchase was a very popular part of his last campaign. So he's disappointing people, and he's doing it kind of significantly and pretty regularly. And it's going to eventually catch up with him.
Can I just go back to the appointments for a sec?
Please.
I think the reason why you're not seeing sort of widespread outrage and protest is none of these people have actually left. None of those posts are currently vacant. If we didn't have an Auditor General, for instance, actually that job's safe for a while, but if Mary Dawson, the Ethics Commissioner, finally got sick of this delay and said, you know what, I'm out of here. I'm not extending my term anymore. I'm packing up my bags and you find someone else to watch this, then you would actually see it turn into a crisis. And I'm not defending or minimizing it, but I'm just saying it's difficult to really declare an emergency when the people who are trying to leave are still staying on in the job. So it's not as though these posts aren't taken right now. The question is, how long are these poor people going to have to stay on after sort of announcing their desire to retire? In some cases, by the way, Mary Dawson's term was also extended under Stephen Harper. She was supposed to be gone before the last government was out. So turns out in some cases it may be a bit trickier to fill those jobs than you'd think.
Listen, you know what? One more thing I want to jump in on because we're running out of time. time, but I wanted to get this in because this is the third thread to this conclusion that I want to talk about. Even one of the Liberal MPs urged his own government to get real. Arnold Chan is the MP from Scarborough Asian Court. He is also fighting an aggressive form of cancer. This week, he used his 20 minutes of debate time to, among other things, make a plea for transparency in the House, especially when it comes to those formulaic talking points. Take a listen.
I think it's more important that we bring our experience, that we bring the experience of our constituents here and impose it on this question of the day, and to ask ourselves, how do we get better legislation? How do we make better laws? We can disagree strongly. In fact, we should. That is what democracy is about. But don't talk to just formulaic talking points. It doesn't elevate this place. It does not give Canadians confidence in what democracy truly, truly means.
Susan, what did you think of that?
I thought it was very moving and very true. He went on to praise Elizabeth May, the Green Party leader, as an exemplar of how a parliamentarian should behave. I completely agree with him. I mean, she's only one person, but she's really made an effort, and she's actually succeeded, I think, in taking the poison out of exchanges and instead bringing a lot of thoughtful research to all of her interventions. That being said, it's very depressing to know that probably life will go on in the same superficial, angry way it always has.
Katie?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with Susan more. I thought it was... I've actually gotten to see Arnold Chan in action perhaps more than some of my colleagues because he's on one of the committees I follow, which is House Affairs. So he is a really thoughtful, someone who takes a very serious approach, but also is always trying to kind of get a sense of what's going on the other side. He really doesn't seem to enjoy and has never seemed to enjoy those aggressive sort of back and forth. And he was actually sucked into one of the House Rules debates earlier this spring, which he mentioned later in his speech as well. So that he kind of regretted getting dragged into that. I think it would be amazing if MPs on all sides would, yes, listen to Mr. Chan and also emulate a little bit more Elizabeth May. Everyone could use it in them.
John, last word to you.
This will never come out. This increased transparency will never result from advisors to the Prime Minister saying, Prime Minister, you have to let control of power go. You have to flow that power down to your cabinet, and cabinet has to flow power down to the members of caucus, because it's not in the nature of a modern government to surrender that kind of control. It's too politically dangerous. It will only happen if MPs themselves, in some kind of profound cultural shift in all parties, agree that they will rise up in the House and demand the accountabilities of their own leadership. I don't expect to see that happen in my lifetime, but it's the only way I think the House of Commons can fundamentally reform itself.